All right, let's do this.
Hi, guys. Welcome to Think Tomorrow, and today we're having a debate. I'm one of the moderators. I'm Keith Harrison, and I'm joined here by Brian Lewis to be the other moderator.
Thanks, Keith. Pleasure to be joining on today, and we're going to have a couple of great topics to discuss.
Yeah, why don't you tell us about those?
So, some of the topics we're discussing, of course, with coronavirus being a big part of our lives these days, whether we like it or not. The quarantine has taught us many things. Maybe has changed the way we thought about certain things. That we're going to talk about that, and of course, with the presidential election going on, we didn't quite forget about that. Bernie, of course, dropping out or suspending his campaign and endorsing Joe Biden. We're going to discuss, maybe where the direction of Biden's campaign should go and where maybe our political influences came from. We can talk about where the beginning came, where the passion started. So, Keith?
Awesome. So today our two debaters are going to be Tony and Kyle. Tony, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you think this is going to go?
Well, thanks for having me on here and that wonderful intro we did. So my name's Tony Vieira. I'm a progressive, is what I would kind of call myself. I'm a Bernie Sanders supporter. I grew up in Taunton, Massachusetts. I was in the Army. Now I'm an EMT, and I'm doing this show with my friends now. So I'm glad to be here, and I'm just really glad to get into a conversation with someone who's not in the same ideology as me, to kind of go through these topics that we want to talk about and kind of see where our differences are, and we'll see who comes out on top.
Awesome. And Kyle, how about you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Awesome. All right. Thanks, Keith. Appreciate that. So, yeah, Kyle Wolf here, CFO. Just, happy to be here, number one, especially reconnecting with Tony just about a month ago and really getting everything kind of back together, right? So, ThinkTomorrow is, we don't want to fail to mention that it was created in 2017. Tony's idea, tried working with another colleague, got Keith on board. It went pretty well for a little while, but, things kind of fell off. Keith had moved over to Montana, and so that's also exciting. But we hope to bring him back by doing this. So that's also breaking news. But yeah, a little bit about myself, right? So from Taunton, we all went to Bristol Plymouth Technical School. We all learned our trades. Tony did automotive, Keith graphic design, and myself being a carpenter. Got myself into automotive for a little while. Went to college, Bryant University, got a great education there, and quite frankly, just been a financial advisor since then. So, really enjoy helping people with their money. But at the end of the day, if I can empower people, and that's really my whole ideology is empowering people. And if we can do that in an objective, fact-based way and also have our own ideologies as well, I think that's a really impactful way to give people some real news.
In perspective.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Awesome. So why don't we jump right into it, and Brian, take it away with the first question.
So to start off today's debate, I think the first question, I think it's a great question to start off with because you always want to find where the grassroots were planted. What policies or politicians influenced your ideology as it is currently? I will start with Tony.
Well, that's a great question. I guess I could start by saying I was never really into politics growing up. I always listened to my dad and my grandfather talking to politics at the table, never really understood any of it. It wasn't until the 2016 election cycle when I started learning about Bernie Sanders. He was able to inspire me to get more active, get more engaged with the political process, and got me to where I am today. So most of his policies I agree with, and I stand behind them 100%. Bernie Sanders himself was the first politician I ever voted for, so I would say that, he's my hero, and that's who I kind of adhere to.
Oh, good answer. Now we're going to break it off to Kyle.
Yeah, absolutely. So as far as politicians, the way I kind of laid this out, did a little bit of research ahead of time, and maybe it's a disadvantage to Tony, perhaps, but breaking news. So politicians, right? So, I'm more, we didn't really talk about my ideologies, but I'm more of a Republican-leaning libertarian, if you will, some mindsets there. But in regards to the politicians I had kind of picked, right? So we have 7. So I'll be very brief because obviously that's a lot to talk about. So 4 Democrats and 3 Republicans. So that's also a spin zone right there. So let's go through the yays and then we'll go through the nays because I think the nays are powerful in itself. So yay. Let's start with Andrew Cuomo, Governor Cuomo. Democrat of New York City. I think Andrew Cuomo is showing a lot of leadership. He's really got his name out there. I mean, people were saying, hey, let's run for president. I think he should have. He said he'll never run. He never will, according to him and his brother's interview on CNN. But perhaps we'll see what happens there. So Andrew Cuomo, I think, takes the cake out of every person, government official, senator, whatever you want to call it. Ed Markey. I'm from Massachusetts. I think Ed Markey has really shown himself as a progressive Democrat, a more poised and calm progressive, if you will, right? Not the norm, if you will. So Ed Markey has done a tremendous job in bringing people together in Massachusetts as a whole. And if I look at his tweets every day, I think he's working with the president in some ways, but yeah, he's not afraid to criticize him, right? And maybe that's a politician thing, or maybe that's just, he's not afraid to criticize, and that's good. I think we need some stability and some things there. Governor Newsom, California Democrat, right? So he's another person that is working very well with Trump. I think between Cuomo and Newsom, they're getting a ton of coverage because obviously they're both very highly populated, dense cities, right? Governor Newsom, right? So yeah, so he's going to have that ability there to potentially just influence people as a whole, because California is a big state, tremendous amount of population there, and a very progressive state, if you will. So those are my 3 yays. My 4 nays on the other side of things. DeSantis, Florida, what are you doing? I mean, the guy is just, he's really dividing the state. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. He's opening churches, but he's not opening the beach. I mean, you can walk clearly at least 6 feet away from people on a beach, but if you're going to go inside of a church, inside of an establishment like that, it just doesn't make sense. So in regards to DeSantis there, but another one, I mean, Senator Cotton, Tom Cotton, Arkansas. I mean, every time he goes on Fox News, and yeah, I watch Fox News, I watch CNN, MSNBC. I try to be pretty well versed with my news there. But Tom Cotton is just so divisive. He starts off every conversation by saying the Chinese Communist Party. And yes, they are a Communist Party, but is that necessary every time? It's the rhetoric that people don't want to hear politicians do anymore. I think people are just tired of it. And speaking of rhetoric, perfect segue, AOC. What is going on? I mean, she's making margaritas. I love margaritas, but what are you doing? No, it's fine. I love it. So AOC, I think she's probably the most divisive, progressive ever. I think Ed Markey is a good guy for giving people a voice on the progressive end. And last but not least, Governor Baker. So he's a Republican, but I'm not afraid to criticize Republicans because I think he's a sellout, quite frankly. I mean, he has really divided this state more than almost any state that I've seen. Besides DeSantis, those two could be up for grabs, and they're both Republicans, quite frankly. So that's an interesting debate, interesting to talk about. And people refer to Baker as a moderate. I get it, but at the end of the day, Governor Baker is just shutting down these. How do you define essential versus non-essential, right? You're going to open up Dunkin' Donuts, but you're not going to open up a gun store. You're not going to open up other things not beside that, right? And I just think like a barbershop, right? I mean, it's up to the states at the end of the day. What do they think is going to be the best fit? I get it. And I think it's good that the states have power in that regard. I think if President Trump shut down everything on every aspect, I think there's going to be a lot of credibility issues there. So, I'm very optimistic for May 1st. We'll see. I mean, not every state can open up on May 1st. New York might take a lot longer than Arkansas, where cases have dwindled. But Michigan is another thing we'll talk about. Sorry to be long there, but those are my 7 picks. Yay and nay.
All right. Tony, do you have anything to say about any of his picks?
I mean, I just want to say, you kind of attacked AOC a little bit, and I'm kind of getting annoyed in like the listening to the media of it. AOC is a progressive liberal, right? She's very fiery. She's more fiery than Bernie Sanders is. So she's loud. She gets in there and she says what she wants. She says what you mean. People have been attacking her because she did that video where she was talking politics and she was creating and doing the margaritas, like you kind of insinuated. Well, she used to be a bartender, and she's on there trying to just connect with the regular people, right? It's a regular job to be a bartender. It's not a regular job to be a politician or a congresswoman. Mm-hmm. She's also, everything that she's put up, she's explained to the T of how she wants to do it. She envisions a Green New Deal to try to fix the climate crisis that's going on. And it's frustrating to me when people attack her when she's just doing what she got elected for. She ran on those things. Everyone goes, she's crazy because she doesn't want to do this. But most of the time, most of the things that she gets criticized on are just exaggerations of what really happened. And, like when the whole Green New Deal came out, people were like, oh, she's trying to get rid of cheeseburgers. She's not trying to get rid of cheeseburgers. She's trying to say, hey, maybe we shouldn't eat so many cows because that's causing an issue to the environment. The other argument was, hey, she wants to get rid of plane travel. How are we going to get to Europe? She said, no, she wants to create a train a low emissions train inside the continental U.S. so that people can get from one side of the country to the other side, making plane travel across country obsolete. You could still take a plane to go across the sea because we would need to, which is, like I said, those things are always exaggerations of what her actual points were. And it's frustrating to me when people attack her for being crazy. And all it really shows is that the opposite side of the aisle is scared because they're trying to attack her now when she's a freshman congresswoman because they know that she's going to be a problem in the future.
Is she a one-term representative, Tony?
She's not a one-term representative. She's doing everything that she was elected to do. She's fighting for the ideas that she ran on, and she's gonna get it. She's gonna get elected, and I'm sure she's probably gonna be on that presidential stage at one point.
Wow, that's awesome. So, Kyle, do you have anything to say about anything Tony had to point out?
No, I mean he brought up some good points about her. You know, obviously I'm open to have that debate, but I think she's just very divisive, and you can argue President Trump is very divisive too. So I think there's two. Good.
I was going to say she's very decisive because she sticks to her ideals. She doesn't flip one. She's not a team player. She's playing for one team, and that's the United States. That's the people of the United States. She's not playing for big money donations. She wants to do what's right, and that's why she's decisive, because she's pointing out stupid shit that's going on that she thinks is wrong and unjust, and she's pointing it out, and that's why people have a problem with her.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I just think she's just very loud, which is good. I mean, it's good to be passionate about your goals and your objective, and I think there's another way to do it without.
I mean, I agree. She is loud and she's decisive because she needs to be, because that's what we need for a politician. We don't need an everyday politician who's just saying, "Hey, I agree with this side when it comes to big tax cuts, but then I also want to act like I'm for the people."
Mm-hmm.
All right. Next on the list, and by the way, Tony, you said decisive like 4 times in there instead of divisive, which is what you were responding to. Just so you know. All right, awesome points made, guys. And we're going to move to our next little topic here. And this is about Bernie Sanders' campaign. So, Kyle, where do you think Bernie's campaign excelled? And where do you think Bernie's campaign needed improvement?
I like how you asked me first because you knew I would be the least prepared for this question, and I love it. So I think one thing he did very, very well, like let's start with what he did awesome, right? So he created a movement, right? A movement that we haven't seen in a long time, a very long time. And that's important. I mean, it's very important that Bernie created this movement because you know what? He didn't want to be the establishment. He wanted to beat the establishment. But by selling out to Joe Biden and endorsing Joe Biden, I think he really did himself a disservice to the people that supported him. So I think people should still vote for Bernie that actually want him to win, even though because he still is in the ballot. Like you could vote for Bernie Sanders. And I think people that should. I don't think they should stay home, which is what they usually do, because what did he win? 5 states, maybe more. So I think the polls show that Bernie is going to beat Trump, but at the end of the day, if you don't vote for Bernie, he will not have a chance against Trump. So that's my thing there. And you know what? He's a populist, right? Bernie's a populist, Trump's a populist. 2 very similar candidates in that regard, very different ideologies. And you could argue Trump is even a liberal in some ways because he was a New Yorker his whole life. And even in his 1988 interview with his real estate, he wanted to tax the rich. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think, people's values and views change over time. And I think we all have that level of compassion and that ideology, right? We have the ability to meet in the middle. I think good humans can meet in the middle. Tony and I usually meet in the middle at some levels, right? And I think debating this is good for both of us in our friendship even. So I think so Bernie, like I said, with his populist movement and, just starting a movement in general and getting people fired up, like getting people, loving the guy, right? But at the end of the day, it comes down to voting day, election day. You have to vote for the candidate you like if you want them to excel. And Michael Bloomberg, perfect example, spent the most out of any candidate. What did he really do? He just disrupted the Democrats. He got more people to endorse Biden. And I don't know how many people even endorsed Bernie, AOC and Omar and other people perhaps, but I think most of the Democrats, the established Democrats anyway, had endorsed Biden. And why did it take so long for Obama? I don't want to get into another topic there, but Obama should have endorsed him very, very early on because that's his vice president, right? That's someone you're supposed to support no matter what their mental capacity is, and we can talk about that a different way. But Bernie, like I said, he has deltas, right? And deltas are opportunities, ways to fix things, right? I think education for all is important. I think eliminating student debt, I don't know if that's possible. Maybe on the public sector, but trying to convince Discover Bank and other private institutions to perhaps get rid of private loans. I don't know if he's. I have to do my research there. It's like he wants to just eliminate all the student loan, the 1.5 trillion and trending there. But I think it's important that he has that delta. Like he has that opportunity to potentially fix that and adjust it, right? And maybe not give people free college, but give people incentives to do well and give them a grant. Because if you make college free, then what's the incentive for the college to exceed in education and investing in their own resources? So maybe give them a grant based on their GPA. If they get a 3.0, it's 80%, a 3.2, 90, right? However that needs to work, I think that'll be more effective because you can give people free stuff. And we've done that with welfare. We've done things with other systems, and other systems are corrupt. But by nature, I think they're great, and they're supposed to help society as a whole. But there are flaws with a lot of systems. Whether you fix it, you repeal it, however you do it. Feel for Bernie Sanders. Tony?
Okay, that's
All right.
awesome. So actually, Tony, he said he was bringing up the education for all, but the trademark of Bernie has always been healthcare. How do you feel about Bernie's healthcare pitch?
Well, I mean, I think it's the most correct one. I think in a society, I believe in a capitalist system, right? I really do, right? Capitalism makes great shoes, and it's great. But when it comes to necessities, something like healthcare, where you need something to live, then I think that it's our responsibility to take care of our poorest people. So I think a healthcare system, a Medicare for all system, is the best way to go. It's also cheaper than what we do now. You will have your taxes will go up with a Medicare for all system, but you will have more money in your pocket. Every study has shown that so far. Don't let the media twist it because they try to. They're like, oh, Medicare for all is going to cost $32 trillion, but they don't tell you that healthcare right now that doesn't do it half as what Medicare for all would do is fucking trillions of dollars more than what it would be. And just if I could just pivot a little bit, I think Kyle was right when he said that Bernie Sanders created the movement, and that is his strong suit. He got tons and tons of young people interested into the political system, active in the political system, right? What I think he did wrong was he wasn't aggressive enough. He did not attack when he was supposed to. He tried to be the nice guy when he shouldn't have, and that led to so many different issues. Him losing the election, it all came down to South Carolina and the South and when they voted. He did not get out there and he did not explain to the Southern voters that voted against him that, hey, Joe Biden was the one that wrote the crime bill, people in jail, and put them in the situations they're in now. So if they voted there, so they're voting for the guy that did that to them instead of the person who marched with Martin Luther King, instead of the guy that got arrested trying to stop segregation in his college. I just want to pivot to what else he said about college, right? You tried to connect college to welfare and how it system of welfare. Well, my question is, how would college be abused in the same way, right? You can't live at college. You're not getting money to go to college. You're just going to college for free. Your incentive to go to school is to get a good paying job afterwards, right? Mm-hmm. And that's the thing. I don't see the worry of how you're going to corrupt that. Now, I would like to see checks in the system in the sense of, if you fail a class, you have to pay the government back its money for the class you take before you take another one. I would like to see that to kind of create an incentive not to fail a class. Mm-hmm. That being said, I don't see a way that there will be a corrupt way into the system for a free education.
Okay. Interesting.
Kyle, thoughts?
Yeah, thoughts on that. I mean, just think of like the public education system. And I'm very for public. I mean, I love trade schools. That's my thing. And those are generally public schools more often than not, like the one we went to, right, in Taunton. But at the end of the day, like, I mean, look at all the people that went to BP. I mean, how many of them just didn't try? They didn't care. Like, would that be the same reason in college? But maybe not, because you don't need to go to college, right? You could join a trade. You can do other things. And I think pushing college is what has created this gap in the working class, the blue collar, the mechanics, the carpenters, the graphic designers. And I know I just said three things that we all did, but that's just what I'm saying. Like, I think we need more incentives because we had this wave, like every 20, 30 years, it's blue collar, then it's white collar, then it's college, then it's not college, right? And then college is too expensive. So then people go to trade schools, or they don't even go to trade high schools, so they don't have to pay for it, right? And I think giving somebody a tangible thing that they could always fall back on, especially during this pandemic that we're going through, right? I can go ahead and fix a house. I was power washing a house last Saturday. There's always ways to make money, but you have to be handy, because if you're just a specialist, right? A specialist in creating websites. And I mean, websites will always be a need, perhaps, maybe not, unless we have some other system. But if there's, just think of another opportunity there, a specialist in something else. You're kind of replaceable. And when you're replaceable by technology, by automation, whatever you want to call it, then you're like left on the streets, and to say the least. I mean, that is not the right word, but it just makes it a lot harder. So I know I'm going in a tangent here, but it makes it difficult to have checks and balances in that kind of system. And that's the same thing with welfare and other systems that we have in place. And I don't mean to use welfare in a negative way. I just think by its core, it was great. And Social Security too. Social Security by its core, it's great. But if you don't give people the knowledge and the education to invest in themselves, invest in their own education, invest in retirement, then there's no incentive for them to really try. And I just think that's the worry I have by giving people free, and by making college free. Maybe give them a grant, 50% of it, they pay a little bit, they take a little loan. Because I think taking a loan is important. I took out $60,000 in debt. I'm down to $10,000 very quickly in 3 years. But that's because I'm efficient and I know how to invest in the market and make quick profits and then pay it back in an efficient way. And I wanted to refinance, things of that nature. But that's what it comes down to for me, is just, I think it's important to take a loan, because you take a loan to get a mortgage, right? I mean, should mortgages be free? Should housing be free? I don't know. I mean, how much free can we really do? And would that really affect the economy in a positive way? But I think educating anybody on any level is important. But do you need a college level education to be educated? Perhaps you don't. That's
my thing to that would be, yes, obviously college education isn't for everyone. And if it was my decision and I had to control the world, I would make every high school a tech school so everyone would learn some sort of a trade.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And you talk about what your incentive is to go to college and pass college. It's to get a good job afterwards, right? Yeah, you're gonna have slackers, and that's why I would also like to have a check in the system, like I said before. If you fail a class, if you get a D in a class where you're not getting credit for the class, you have to pay the money back to the government before you take another class. It's something I would like to see, and that would also create an incentive. But to say, oh, you need to take a loan because that thing, all it does is create student loan debt, and that's what we're crushing under. Our economy is so slow when it comes to young people because they can't buy homes, they can't buy cars, they can't do these things because they're crushed under student loan debt right now. Again, going back to the whole incentive thing, right? Getting a job is your incentive to do it. And I think that, and so yeah, you associated school with the whole free thing. And it goes back to the whole idea of meeting necessities and wants, right? You don't need a house. You don't need an apartment. You need some sort of shelter. We can talk about that later. But you need an education in some sort of a way. If you want to be a firefighter, you need to go to the academy. If you want to be a cop, you need to go to the academy. If you want to be a paramedic, you have to go to school. If you want to be a carpenter, you have to go to school. If you want to be a mechanic, you have to go to school in some sort of a way, right? So that is your incentive to go to school. And those are necessities for you to get a job. And you talk about, I forgot exactly what you said, but, is that really good for the economy? Yes, it is, right? We've already seen this, right? The GI Bill. For every dollar that we put into the GI Bill, which would give our veteran students way more than what we're talking about giving free college for, right? For every dollar we put into the GI Bill, the country gets $7 back in tax money for educating that person. So that's a 700% increase into the tax budget for every dollar we put in. So yes, it would help the economy. It would also alleviate student loan debt, which would allow young people to buy things and buy houses and buy apartments so that they have these things and live well. It would lower the cost of mental health because people wouldn't be so goddamn depressed because they don't have any fucking where to go in their life.
All right. So interesting, Tony. I love your take on that. And Kyle, great job defending yourself and your points and ideologies as well. So we're going to move on now to, I'm going to ask Tony first. What can Joe Biden do to win this election?
Good question. I think the biggest thing he can do is not make the election about Donald Trump. He needs to. I've been saying this since day one. To any Democratic candidate, you cannot go into this race saying, "I am not Donald Trump." You need to tell them you need to tell the people who you are, right? So don't just go, "I'm not Donald Trump, so vote for me." You have to put out policy, which is why, again, I'm a Bernie Sanders supporter because he's very heavy on policy. Whereas Joe Biden will come up and say, I don't really agree with that. I'm kind of in the middle. I kind of just want to do this thing and that, and Donald Trump sucks. So he needs to stay away from that. He needs to come up with policy. He needs to put it out there and not make this election about Donald Trump. The other thing he needs to do is he needs to accept the Bernie base into his base. He needs to concede a little bit and give some progressives what they want. It doesn't have to be full on Bernie platform, but you need to say, hey, we're going to do this in the hopes that we will get there at some point. And I think that's probably a big thing that he needs to do to get the vote to win.
That's awesome. I love that. Kyle, I'm going to ask you the exact same question. What do you think Joe Biden can do to win this election?
Well, let me start with, number one issue for Joe Biden is his credibility, right? So his voting history. He was in the Senate for a long time, very long time. And we have seen, and Brian and I have talked about this historically many times, is that he had voted against civil rights policies. They'll dive deeper and find out. But he is somebody that had marched with a KKK leader, and Bernie Sanders had marched with MLK. So there's two different viewpoints there, right? So credibility, right? He's sleepy, he's creepy, whatever you want to call him. I mean, he has a very inconsistent voting record. And a good point that Tony had made is he needs to kind of concede to Bernie in some level, right? And to really concede, especially with a student loan forgiveness program, it rules out people making over 125,000 or more. And maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it's not. I don't know. You have that debate. If it's 125,000 good enough for you just to pay your loans back, maybe you're living okay at that point, right? But who is making 125K out of college? Not many people, right? So I think that's the issue. Another issue with him is that he's only giving this student loan forgiveness. This is Joe Biden, not Bernie, right? To public colleges. So not private schools like Bryant University, Harvard, unless Harvard's public. But, he's just only doing it to public schools. So that kind of segments a lot of people out of that. And I think the biggest crisis is the people going to private schools that come out with a degree that might not be useful to make $100,000 a year. And if my biggest thing is, if you're going to go to college for $50,000 a year, you need to at least make $50,000 at a minimum, because that's still going to take a long time for you to pay back, right? So if your career is going to pay $40,000 and you're going to Harvard for $80,000 with student living and living there and room and board, all that stuff, I don't think it's a good investment. But I think at 18 years old, do you really know about investments? Do you know about all these things? No, it took me a long time for me to wrap my head around investing, and it takes a long time. It's a big learning curve, right? So you leave it up to an 18-year-old to make those decisions that have a high school education that doesn't even teach them how to budget, how to use a checking account, quite frankly. So I think budgeting and finance is very critical in a senior year of high school, or junior year even, because some people drop out. So give it to him junior year, whatever you want to call it. Number two, he has a modest child allowance plan, Biden. So this could be something he could run on and talk about a little more in depth. So he wants to give children that are under 18 $300 a month. Not the kids, but the families, right? The mother, the father, the guardian, right? There's opportunities for that to be higher. And Tony, you could probably correct me on this, but I think Bernie might have some kind of plan like this, potentially, for children. Like give them a certain amount a month to raise a child, because it's very expensive to do so. And it might not be easy with the income levels that we have and all the bills that we have day to day that are constantly increasing. And we can get into that topic another time. And back to his history, right, with Joe Biden. He has historically proposed cuts to Social Security and Medicare in the 90s during the Clinton administration. So again, civil rights policies, those are going to hurt him, right? Because he's old. He's been in the politics for a long time, which I don't think being a politician for a career is really good for your brand, because you could flip-flop, right? We've seen people go Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, progressive, like all over the place. Like, what are you? Are you an independent? Like, Bernie, are you really an independent because you're an independent senator, but now you're running as Democrat? And maybe that's because it's easier for him to get there. But the biggest thing for Biden is his credibility. That's going to hurt him in the long run, and I think that's going to be the reason why he loses this election. But he does have opportunities as far as picking the correct vice president, which could very well be Tammy Duckworth. I rest my case.
So, if I can, I just want to rebuttal real quick.
Mm-hmm.
Just something you said that kind of like ticked me a little bit. So the last segment we were just talking about, you said how you should be getting you should be taking a loan out because it's responsibility and blah 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 blah. But in the next breath on this statement, you say, hey, 18-year-olds don't really know what they're doing. They're fresh out of high school. They don't learn these things. So why is it okay? Okay to settle them with crap load of debt when they don't know any better, but also, hey, they don't know any better.
That's not my view. I just think that's my view for Biden to win. That's why we were trying to talk about is like the opportunity for Biden to win. He needs to concede to Bernie. I'm not saying he's going to win, and I don't really support any of his views at all. Really, not many. But yeah, it's not my view. I just think this is what's going to help him if he concedes to Bernie on some level, right? With education and healthcare, Medicare for all. Like those are things that he has opportunities for.
So the great points, guys, so far. I mean, that was a great topic on Biden. As far as the last question here, since Joe Biden's been very, the Democratic side's been very vocal about how to deal with this coronavirus deal. How do we view, what did we learn ourselves necessarily? It doesn't have to necessarily be a politics thing. It could be a personal and emotional level. Like, what have we ourselves learned from this coronavirus standpoint? Because Joe Biden's past, as Kyle mentioned, that's not going to be on the forefront of the conversation until this thing is over. And it may have to be over soon in order for that to be on the forefront. So with the coronavirus being like 85% of the conversation right now, what have we learned about this virus that needs to be changed going forward? How do we adapt? So I'm going to start with Kyle, actually.
All right, that's a great question, Brian. So I wrote a lot of notes for this one, but I'll try to be quick with each point, right? So I think the number one thing that we learned from this is we need to be America first. And what I mean by that, and I don't mean nationalism, I mean from manufacturing to jobs to blue-collar industrialization that we had in the 20s after the Great Depression, the 30s after the Great Depression, and even the 40s and so on, right? The amount of blue-collar work and manufacturing that we had was tremendous. And we learned a lot, and we automated things. We made things a little more efficient with robotics and stuff like that, and we have gotten very advanced as a society. But that doesn't mean that we should be a service-based economy. I don't think that's important. I think it's very important to have grassroots, and this is what it's learned. China is withholding some of these ingredients that we need, the raw ingredients, the raw materials to create some of these vaccines or some of these medications that people need, right? They're withholding that from the United States. They're withholding masks. They're withholding PPE, right, as a whole. So we need to reassess our situation and bring back a lot of jobs. And while I think free trade is very important for the society as a whole, free trade is great, but you shouldn't disincentivize companies to leave the United States. They should not go to Mexico and create Mustangs, Corvettes, right? American muscle cars, you look at those parts, they're made in Mexico. And nothing wrong with Mexico, but their quality is not as good as the U.S. And I think our quality has gotten better over the years, and I think we need to tremendously invest in our quality and our processes, because I think we could have automated a lot of things. And I know automation leads to less jobs, I get it. But by automating, you're more efficient, which means you can hire people on the sales end, and you can sell to other countries, and you can become a service economy, which is what we became. So number two, and that was a long one, so I'm going to go short with the rest of them. So number two, we have learned that mental illness is real. And I think we all know mental illness and the severity of it. And I think we need to invest a lot more into it as a whole. And I think that's going to be one of the things that it's going to take a lot of people to adjust, getting back to their normal life. And just a lot of things that are going to be a big difficulty there. And I had a statistic, and I didn't write it down. Okay. Yeah, so there you go. Back to mental. It was actually my 8th point, but now I'm going to bring it into my 2nd point. So drug overdoses, suicides, right? This brings back to the whole mental health thing. Fox News cited the New York Post tonight, and they had said they estimate 77,000 people could die to overdoses and suicide. And I think that's important, right? Because people are having a tough time adjusting to this whole stay-at-home kind of thing, and people are literally afraid to leave the house. Some people, right? And I think it's the media that's making it very negative and very fearful, and it's not as bad as it seems. But people are dying. Don't get me wrong. That's not what I'm saying. Number 3. Does $1,200 really do much? I don't think it does. What is $1,200? I mean, I got it today. I mean, did I really feel that great? Yeah. I mean, it's $1,200. I already paid into it. Like, great. $1,200 is going to be a short-term fix, but Canada is doing $2,000 for the next 4 months. So that's something to talk about as well. But most Americans have become introverts. That's another thing we could talk about, right? And maybe we have been introverts since this whole social media, and people go home, scroll on social media, they're introverts, right? They don't even go out anymore, some people. And now we really can't go out. There's nothing to do. Another thing, number 5. So 17 million people today, on whatever today is, March 15th, tax deadline. But now it got extended to July 15th. Great. 17 million are unemployed in the United States. That's 10% of the labor market, a very big number. And it's just going to get higher. And the Federal Reserve had estimated 32% by the time this is done with, right? So, you have another thing, protests in Michigan. I mean, I can go on and on, but, between sheriffs releasing illegal immigrants that have been convicted of murder, rape, all these things. I mean, you can really just keep going on and on. And what it's told us is Tammy Duckworth will be the vice president to Joe Biden. Let's bring everything back to the United States. I get it. China's cheaper. Mexico's cheaper. Labor is cheaper, right? But to disincentivize these companies and tax them to the point where they don't even want to do business in the United States. I think that's the big issue. We need to bring back these core jobs because China is withholding PPE materials, they're withholding essential ingredients to make medicine. And that is one thing we learned, is that we need to have this level of infrastructure in the United States. Blue collar, industrialization. I don't think that was something that should have ever left, because when things like this happen and people don't have service jobs because they're very replaceable, this is the issue we have. And now we don't have the materials that we should have had on reserve. Tony?
All right. So yeah. So I agree with you in the sense of we need to move away from a service economy. We probably should start manufacturing our own stuff again. But this whole idea that like you just said, we shouldn't be taxing people so that so they can go away and go to China and get stuff built there. We have tax cuts already, and we still don't have the jobs here anyway. So that doesn't work. We need to incentivize them to stay here in the sense of fining them for leaving. You know what I mean? It's not about we tax them to this degree, they're just going to leave. They're leaving now because it's cheaper no matter what, because we have standards here, right? So we need to give them negative reinforcement to stay. Other than that, yes, we need to have our own manufacturing systems here. But I don't think that's really where we went wrong for this. What we learned from this quarantine, this coronavirus, what we learned is top down, this country is not ready for a pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
People don't understand what's going on. The administration wasn't ready for this when they should have been. Back when the whole H1N1 thing was going on, there was doctors and there was the CDC and there was the task force that Obama put in place during that, coming on and saying, hey guys, we made it through this, but you know what? We're not ready for a real pandemic. And it shows. And then Trump gets in, cuts the task force down that he had, cuts funding to the CDC and all these other things, and now we get hit with a pandemic and we're not ready. We knew about this pandemic. We knew this was going to be an issue months ago. And months ago, the administration and Congress, the government should have incentivized businesses to start producing things that they knew we were needing, and they didn't do that. They failed. So we learned that the government failed us when it came to this. We also learned that the general population doesn't understand how germs work, and because of that, it's causing more problems, right? We have everyone going to these stores and they're touching everything with their gloves, and they take the gloves off and throw it on the ground, and they touch the things that are already contaminated, so they're still spreading the germs anyways. We need to get educated on how to prevent these things from happening. And I think that's the biggest takeaway, is that the administration, the government failed us because they weren't ready and they didn't take this seriously, and that we also need to educate our people.
So let me have another question on top of that, actually, because that's a great point. But judging based on other disasters that have happened over the last decade, I'm not going to go into the whole gun crisis because that's a whole different story with the mass shootings. But wouldn't the way that American politicians reacted to that give you the impression that we were far from ready at all, Tony?
I mean, I'm sorry, can you rephrase that again? I'm sorry, I didn't really get the question.
So based on the way that American government has reacted in past tragedies since 9/11, where we reacted very swiftly and very profoundly, and it had a lasting impact, and it changed the way that it had American positive morale. But every single disaster, every single tragedy that we seem to have, I'll put it on that word, it seems like everyone's hoping for something to happen, but nothing actually changes. And then it keeps happening again. We're such a reactionary society. So wouldn't that alone give you the impression that we're not ready for this?
Well, I wouldn't even call us reactionary because we don't do anything anyways. Every time, since 9/11, every time there's been a major issue that happens in the country, you have one side trying to fix it and the other side just trying to stop it for political points, right? We never come together. We never, actually try to solve problems. We're too busy fighting each other.
Absolutely.
We're so divisive in this country that we can't get anything done. And it's not about left or right. It's not about anything. It's about what we're supposed to do to make things better, right? You said gun violence is one thing, right? We haven't done anything, right? It doesn't matter if you're a more liberal or more conservative. Nothing has changed since the first time we started seeing this uptick in mass shootings from right now, right? Everything's just the same. We can't do anything because we're too busy fighting and not trying to make common sense ideas and get things going through. And that's like that on every different scale, right? When we had the whole H1N1, right? Everyone sat there and blamed Obama and it wasn't that bad. But now you have, this administration that comes in and is just trying to reverse everything that Obama did because he doesn't like Obama. And it's caused us to have more issues. He's trying to hide it. For the first couple months, he was like, "Oh, there's nothing to see here. It's not a problem. There's nothing going on. I'm going to have that cruise ship sit off on the side of the coast so it doesn't jack my numbers up because I don't want everyone to think I'm failing." We have this problem of just, Americans are, I don't want to say ignorant, but like uneducated. They're not grasping the situation. It's many people's fault. It's not just the general population. It's the news media. It's almost everything in our system is just wrong, and it's not preparing us correctly for anything.
Yeah, and yeah, that's a good point. So with the closing thoughts there, I mean, guys, this was some great conversation. First and foremost, some things that maybe I didn't expect to be mentioned here, obviously. So Kyle, Tony, thank you very much for a very classy and fine debate, gentlemen. Keith, it's been a pleasure doing the moderating thing with you.
The honor's mine. Yeah, awesome. So thank you guys again from my side, and I hope everybody that views us can weigh in the comments and tell us what they think about what we talked about. We'd love to hear some feedback, and thank you, and good night.
Thank you, everyone, for participating and watching the show here. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, you name it. We will be there. PeopleThinkTomorrow.com. Peace.